boss and a candy man. Like a freight train rolling, bringing truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV Chat starts now.
Oh, that was a mighty theme song y'all got.
Thank you. That was Connor Bond asked me to do that, and he said, "Can you write a theme song?" And I said, "Well, maybe." And about 5 minutes later, I called him back and said, "Hey, I got it." It wasn't a whole lot of work went into it. I just had to go record it then. But Monday night, everybody, here's the show we've all been waiting for, the 100th episode of SCV Chat. And we have as our guest, the one and only Mr. Ben Jones, who y'all all know as Cooter on the Dukes of Hazzard. And Ben, I can't tell you how proud we are to have you here, buddy. It's great to see you.
Well, I can't think anywhere I'd rather be than hanging out with some good old boys down south.
I hear you.
Yeah,
I hear you.
I've traveled about every square inch of it over the years. I had some great jobs working on the railroad, and then in show business, touring a lot. And after I still got a band. We go all over and do personal appearances. But as long as I'm in the South, I'm home, wherever it is.
I know. I feel the same way. I can remember coming back from Okinawa 25, 35 years ago. And when I got into Tennessee on my way home, I thought I finally made it home, and I still had about 6 hours to go. But we're glad to see you, buddy. And I'm going to get right to it. We've got a lot of questions and a lot of things to talk about. But real briefly, I know we're talking today, and you said you grew up in Virginia.
Yeah.
As a youngster, kind of in the Tidewater region, right?
Yeah, I was born in Edgecombe County, North Carolina, down near Tarboro and Rocky Mount. But 3 weeks old, moved to Portsmouth, Virginia, which is right down on the docks, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and all that. And grew up there in a section house, railroad section house. We didn't have it, and this was in the 40s. Now, we didn't have any electricity. We didn't have any indoor plumbing, any of that stuff. But we're right in the middle of what was kind of a war zone, because Norfolk and Portsmouth, that's the biggest naval base in the Atlantic there, and the Norfolk Navy Yard, the Marine Barracks, Oceana Naval Air Station. So my first memories are World War II, and we seem to be in the middle of it. There was, big Navy dirigibles, blimps overhead, going overhead. They were looking for German U-boats off the coast. And we had troop trains coming in and out of the freight yard, and the biggest ships in the world coming right by where we were. So I was kind of, that affected me a lot, I think, understanding. We had people, Mama had a couple of brothers in the Pacific, and we could hear the Naval Hospital was just across the water from us, and they would play taps every time a young Navy man died or a Marine, something like that. And we'd hear that a lot. And my older brothers and I, we rigged up this little flagpole, and we'd bring it down to half mast when we heard them playing taps. So it was an interesting place to grow up. And, right there was all bigger railroad and locomotives coming in and out, and, ships going by. And it was a good place to grow up. Our side of the tracks, I had to cross the railroad yard to get to my school. Everything was segregated, of course, in those days. It was Jim Crow, and we lived on the African American side of the tracks. And so I was kind of soaked in all of that. I knew that culture, knew those people, and we shared a lot. And but this was in the 40s and 50s, before the civil rights movement before all those changes took place. So it was a time of strict segregation, and I remember that very well. But I also just fell in love with being in Virginia, and I fell in love with history and the great. I learned a lot about right there. Where nearby was Yorktown and Williamsburg and Jamestown. So that's a lot of history right there. That's where it all started, and for the United States. And so I was kind of soaked in it. I love history, memorized Patrick Henry's speeches and all that stuff. Was a great admirer of Jefferson and Washington and all those people, and of course of Robert E. Lee, and so it. But growing up there, it had a great influence on me because, as I say, we lived in kind of a primitive circumstance. We had an old outhouse down over the creek, which was the Elizabeth River and Scotts Creek go out into the Chesapeake Bay. So I'm seeing the biggest ships in the world come by, and we're living by a freight yard, and there's stuff, all that stuff coming in and out. I learned geography from reading the boxcars. I'd see like Baltimore and Ohio. So where's that? And I'd go back, look it up in the railroad directory, so anyhow, it was an interesting way to grow up, and I ended up later, just by great fortune, ended up at because I was a feckless student, and I should mention I was a teenage alcoholic, and I drank from the time I was a kid to when I was 36, and nearly died from alcohol. And
Wow.
by the grace of God, I got sober, and that was in 1977. So 45 years I've been sober. And in those 45 years, it's like having lived two different lives from the one I had before. And I got sober, and within a year, I was on the Dukes of Hazzard. And that started in 1978. And in 1988, I got elected to Congress. And it all goes back to 1977 when I was dying on the floor in Atlanta from booze. And I just said one time, I said, "Please, God, help me." And He did, and I've found the greatest fellowship among other people who are recovering alcoholics. I don't talk much about that, but I wrote a book about it. I wrote a book, I don't know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, called Redneck Boy in the Promised Land. I told my whole life story, and it went into all of that. But the greatest blessing I've got is the blessing that the Lord bestowed on me, and that was sobriety. And I started a whole nother life, and it's been a happy one, and fairly successful, I guess you'd say, in show business and politics, and now in business with what we do. So, but I've always loved history, and growing up, steeped in it like that, where you could go 20 miles, and there was Jamestown and Yorktown and Williamsburg and all the great Civil War battlefields. And there was, learn about the Washington was Virginian, and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and on and on. It was the cradle of America, really. And so, and fortunately, I did love history, and I've always studied it, and I've got a couple of libraries full of it now. And anyhow, it's been an interesting life. And but I always identified, I still and always will identify, not just as an American, but a Southerner. I mean, a Southerner. That's just in my DNA. And both sides of my family and all the folks on both sides fought for the South. We've always been hardworking people, farmers, railroad men, and the salt of the earth. And that's why I so much enjoyed working on the Dukes of Hazzard. I'd had a long career before that came along. But like I say, I was my own worst enemy back in those days when I was drinking so much. But I did a lot of plays, I did a lot of movies, small parts mostly, and had a lot of fun doing that and learned the way. But once I cleaned up my act, my life just took off. And I'd had a part in Smokey and the Bandit. Now, I know people have seen that movie 50 times and don't know I'm in it. But right at the beginning of it, it's a long. So we've got some time. I'll tell the story. That was in I think that's back in, I don't know, 76 or 77. There were a lot of films like that coming in and shooting around Atlanta. I got a call. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd been out raising cane all night, and wake up and who's calling me at this hour? And it was a casting director. So we need you to get out to the fairgrounds at Lakewood to do a little part in this movie. I said, oh, all right, all right, all right. So I, sort of drinking coffee, spilling all over. I drive out there and it's Smokey and the Bandit. And it's this huge set. And Burt Reynolds riding around and all this stuff. And I had this little line, and I know people have seen that movie 50 times. And they know, because at the beginning of it, Big Enos and Little Enos, they come in and say, hey, Hoss, you can tell me where I can find the bandit. And my line was, I haven't seen him. So I southernized. I said, I ain't seen him. And that was it. I had cut. All right, you're done. You can go. And I went back home, went back to bed. It still wasn't 7:30 in the morning. I woke up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon with a terrible hangover. I said, I dreamed I was in a movie. It was like that. But here's the thing now. It was the scripts that I haven't seen him. I turned it into one word the way we do in the South. So I ain't seen him. So I was just saying, I ain't seen him, and they said, okay, cut. Now, I've been a lot of movies and films over the years, but for those 3 words, which I turned into one word, about every 3 or 4 months, I'll get a little check in the mail for, I don't know, might be $19.12 for the 23rd rerun in Sweden or something of Smokey and the Bandit. But I figure over the years, off of that, I've made about, I don't know, $12,000 a word.
Wow.
Anyhow,
Wow.
that was a great career. And George, of course, took off for filming and everything. So I was in the right place at the right time when the Dukes of Hazzard started.
Now, how did you end up on the Dukes?
Well, I had just been in the right place at the right time. I had cleaned up my act, and I started getting hired a lot for different things. But I went in there, and when I was a kid, I'd done all kinds of work when I was a kid, but I had worked as a grease monkey. Worked with a buddy of mine, a man I worked for named Stump Roundtree's Pure Oil Station in Portsmouth. And I worked up there for a while, and after a while, they called me Buster in those days. They said, Buster, he said, hey, you doing pretty good with the grease jobs, the oil changes, you work the front real good, you're great at changing the tires and, checking the oil and cleaning those windshields, but you stay away from my tools. You ain't no mechanic. And so it turned out I got to be the most famous mechanic in the world, on the Dukes of Hazzard. But I was, once again, I worked a lot as an actor. I was good at it. And, that just came along. A friend of mine, a guy named Guy Waldron, who was from Kentucky originally, but I'd known him in Atlanta. And he had run into an old boy, a moonshine runner named Jerry Rushing, who's a great character from North Carolina. And he did a movie based on Jerry's stories about running shine up in the hills and called it The Moon Runners. And I had a small part in that movie. It was kind of loosely connected to Thunder Road, which was the first of the moonshine movies. 1957, Robert Mitchum did that.
Yeah.
It was a great movie.
Sang the theme song.
Low budget, had a great, let me tell the story. I can tell it all. You know that in Thunder Road?
Yeah.
Had Robert Mitchum wrote it and directed it, produced it, wrote the song for it and everything. It was a great movie. So this was kind of loosely based on that kind of idea, the Moonrunners was. And he had Robert Mitchum's son, Jim Mitchum, who had been in Thunder Road, doing one of the parts in this Moonrunners. And I had a small part in it playing a revenuer who arrested the mule who was hauling the sugar up to the still. But anyhow, so about a year later, there was a time when the South was, Jimmy Carter was president. Burt Reynolds was doing all those movies. NASCAR was taking off. And he had done Smokey and the Bandit, which I had a small part in. And then so Guy Waldron took that Moonrunners idea and turned it into the Dukes of Hazzard. And it came to Georgia to shoot in the fall of 1978. And I was assured it was going to be filmed in Georgia, all of it. You know, we did the first 5 episodes, and then they said, we're going to move the whole thing to California now. So there I was, because I just dedicated to the South. I'd been to Los Angeles, had no interest in Hollywood. But they paid for me to fly back and forth. And they didn't know how long it was going to last, but went for 7 seasons, 7 years. I'm flying back and forth. Got a lot of frequent flyer miles, but had a wonderful home in Georgia and loved working in California. That show had the greatest cast, the chemistry, the fun of that. It's still going strong all over the world, and we're still having fun with it. And we started filming in 78, so that's been 44 years ago it's been going, and it's still shown. The DVDs and Amazon Prime and all that, and it's shown all over the world, and they've made feature films. It just keeps going on, and we just continue to have fun with it, even though I've done a lot of other things. But it was also a way, and this I love about it, because my love of the South. I didn't want to go to California. I'd been out there, didn't like it, was loving Georgia and helping to build a film industry there. But it was a positive show about the South. You know, the way we've been put down for so long and basically slandered by the national media and all that. But here was a bunch of proud, and they were simple country people. But it was also a show like those shows I grew up with on the Saturday matinees. I remember Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Hopalong cast, and they were the good guys and the bad guys, and you knew which was which, and had a lot of action, had great music, always had a pretty rancher's daughter, had some slapstick comedy and a comic sidekick, but the good guys always won. And the reason they won, us kids knew it too, was because they always did the right thing. They made the right. Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, and there's no cussing in those movies, no blood, and the good guys won. It had a happy ending, and we loved that, and we looked up to those heroes, and that's what the Dukes of Hazzard was. It was sort of like one of those old westerns, Saturday matinee westerns, with cars instead of horses, and the good guys always won because they did the right thing, and we had prettiest girl in the world, walking by the camera every once in a while. Great action, slapstick comedy, and that stuff never gets old. You can watch that show right now, and it looks like it might have been filmed back here in the Blue Ridge Mountains last week.
Yeah.
It was a university ball cap, and we wear ball caps, we work shirts, and we drive old cars on dirt roads. And it's the heartland of America. And it got ratings that are undreamed of now. I mean, you couldn't imagine 30, 40 million people a week watching on Friday nights. See, there weren't but 3 networks. No show even gets 5 million people now.
I remember.
And it was a phenomenal thing, and I got to be a part of it and still part of it, but it also showed the South in a positive way.
Yeah.
Simple country people, hardworking farmers and all that, doing the right thing and hanging together as a family, all those family values I talk about. And that's the one show that they went after, that the left went after to get it off of television because of the Confederate battle flag, the St. Andrew's cross, that Christian cross on top of our car, the General Lee. They went after that. Hate symbol. And that's just, we know it's BS, and we fight back. They don't understand that about us, And I think I mentioned to you when we chatted one time that, I was in the civil rights movement. As I say, I grew up on that side of the tracks. I grew up with black people, and I actually have some black heritage in my family. I'm descended from a slave back on the eastern shore of Virginia. So I know what I'm talking about. I went through the civil rights movement. I went to jail, and I got shot at. And I had it out with the Klan too. But I thought that was the right thing to do, and I still think it's the right thing to do. And that to me is what the South is about. We've always, despite all those troubles, the best people in the South not only looked out for one another, but really genuinely cared and loved each other, black and white and red and brown. And we've experienced this wonderful region together for hundreds of years now. So
When
you
did
I get to preaching sometime, but when
I
people
hear you.
start
Hey, preach on.
that we're all bigots and that we're all hateful because of a flag with a Christian cross on it, the cross of St. Andrew, who was, crucified in that X like that. It's an ancient symbol. I mean, it's on the flag of Scotland, flags all over the world. And that's the thing they come after because they don't know history and they don't know, they want, just to attack and attack and attack, to attack the Confederacy, which is ongoing. When they start taking, statues of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington out of the capital of the United States. I mean, it's something. The train is off the track, and what it's going to take to get us back on the track is, as Dr. King said, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners dining together at the table of brotherhood. I mean, that's sharing the things that are good about our culture and good about our society, and there's lots of them. I mean, we're a place of great songs and stories and music and tales and work and weather. All of those positive things that we love about the South are shared by people of all colors. And that's sort of my little crusade. I am so proud to be, descended from men who represented and fought for the South and did what they absolutely believed was the right thing in that time. And to see them slandered now by the left and the media, and to see our cultural, our ancestry, and our ancestors attacked in this vicious way, and it goes on and on and on. I think I mentioned to you the other day in Culpeper, Virginia. Culpeper was an Englishman who hardly ever came. Lord Culpeper, he could have cared less about this place. Well, in Culpeper, Virginia, they named a lake there for the gallant Pelham, who was killed around Culpeper, Virginia. It's called Lake Pelham, and the county council the other day, the supervisors got together and took Pelham's name off of that lake because he was a Confederate soldier. This was in the heart of the South in Virginia, and called it Lake Culpeper. They don't understand history. They don't know history. A lot of them, have just moved here within the last decade or so because the living here is so good. They move south and they want to be like New Jersey or something. So I don't know. It gets my dander up.
I don't think they understand our view of family, for one thing. I mean, even if you go back to the 1600s when first the Jamestown colonists and then later the Massachusetts colony, when they came here, even the way they came here was differently. When our people came into Virginia, it was mom, dad, sister, brother, all the aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, cousins, everybody. And when the Puritans came, as mom, dad, sister, and brother, it was the immediate family. And I've had people from up north that have moved here, good people, that are, they're not coming down here to change it. They're here because they like it better here than they do in the north. But I've had a couple of them tell me, you people cling to your history up north. That's just not a thing. And you hit on it earlier. I think that when people abroad, when people overseas think of America, they think of the South. The South is America. It's the and all of the values that were represented on the Dukes of Hazzard. Uncle Jesse was kind of this wise old patriarchal person, and he was the guiding light of the family, and everybody, nobody crossed him. We all had to have his blessing on things. There's a ton of truth to that. I mean, it was that way in my family. I had great grandparents, and my grandfather, their son, he's 60 years old and he still ain't stepping on mom and dad's toes. We're still going to make sure everything is kosher from their perspective. But I was going to ask you, at what point did they begin attacking the battle flag on the General Lee on the car? What was that around the time of the early 90s, or was it after that?
I think this whole thing started, it seems to me, 10, 15 years ago. And,
Okay.
and it was coincidental with, I mean, there were people, oh, you know, that movement against the take down the flag here. It was a big fight in Georgia because it used to be on the state flag there. And you can, but it has to do with the influence of media, and media does not come out of the South. Ted Turner had his thing for a while, but we are overwhelmed by the national networks and their view of things, and the larger papers in the country, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, LA Times, all those magazines, they're all left-wing, to the left of center, certainly, and generally run by, you know, the Democrat Party, which has gone to the left in my lifetime. I mean, I think I was elected to Congress as a Democrat, and I was a pretty progressive guy, you know, in the civil rights movement. I knew personally, I knew the King family, and I knew John Lewis very well. We had our offices right next to each other in D.C., and Andrew Young is still a friend. I talk to him all the time. But, you know, suddenly there was a shift, and it became an easy target for them to say, you know, take down that flag, rebel flag. It stands for this and it stands for that. Without the people, it's been my experience that those people don't know that they haven't studied the history. They don't know why what they don't know jack about it. And I start saying, well, did you ever read, you know, Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address, where he proposed making the Corwin Amendment to the Constitutional? He supported that and wanted to become a permanent part of the Constitution. And the Corwin Amendment would have guaranteed slavery forever. That was Lincoln now. You know, it would have made slavery permanent. And so they just don't know those things, I guess, or they conveniently overlook them so they can make their arguments. You know, it's a journey. Anytime you have an experiment like America, and we've been through all this. The descendants of Confederate soldiers have given their lives in Vietnam. We've given their lives in Korea. They gave their lives in World War II and World War I and the Spanish-American War. I mean, I don't know what Joe Wheeler, who was the youngest Confederate general, rode up San Juan Hill with Teddy Roosevelt in 1898. We're patriotic people, and it isn't about what color you are. And as I said, my DNA's got a little bit of everything in there, and but we got to pull together. And these people will divide us, and they divide us for partisan reasons. The other part of that has sort of exacerbated this whole debate is coming from academia, and that whole of political correctness, of cultural cleansing. That's what this would be called, where people can go back and say, well, that offends me. It offends me. They don't even know it's a Christian cross. So they don't know the history of the war. They don't know why that really happened. So, you know, the South is still a whipping boy. You know, still the thing they can kick around after 170 years it's been. So 160 years. So they don't know. And you're dealing with people who are ignorant. They don't understand that that's the Christian cross of St. Andrew. They don't understand that it was a battle flag. It represented no government. It was the common soldiers out there. Most of whom, just like most people say, own no slaves. It wasn't about slavery to them, and it wasn't about slavery to a lot of us. But it's mixed up in that very hot button thing. The minute you start talking about race, you've got anger, you've got resentments, you've got people get their backs up. And having been a part of the civil rights movement, I was so proud of what we accomplished. It's sort of like we took down Jim Crow. We took down, white only, and that whole ongoing insult to black people that they had to deal with every day. You can't come in here. You can't eat in here. You can't sit up front in this bus. Or that. That's just wrong. And that's changed, but now they're going after these historical things, and you cannot judge the past by the present. You can understand the present in relation to the past in terms of, well, we've come this far. We used to do that, but we made a little progress there. But some of these things are positive things, and history and heritage. This country came together, and young men and women of the South of all colors and all races came together and served their country, served the United States of America for the protection of everybody. And we're given, it's sort of like, no, it's an easy target. It's an easy target. Take the Dukes of Hazzard off the air because of the car and how that's somehow, I don't think I've ever met any black people that didn't watch the Dukes of Hazzard. There was no racism in Hazzard County. I mean, the last thing on anybody's mind. We treated everybody the same. That was the great thing about the show. People recognize those family values. Do the right thing and treat everybody the same. And Uncle Jackson, you go back and tell that woman you're sorry you knocked over her mailbox, things like that. So it was always do the right thing, and we had a huge, and still do. I mean, we do this. I still have Cooter's Place, and we have a lot of fun with the show. I can't tell you how many black folks come in there all the time. Our neighbors around the store, all the they love it. They love it. They love the idea. They relate to it because the Dukes. A lot of people could relate to it because the Dukes were always up against the man, the bank and the boss hog and the guy that ran everything. And the Dukes were, the underdogs. And so I think a lot of people related to fighting the system, that's what we did. And to take our show, our sweet little G-rated, Sunday school kind of show and turn it into the way they want to do, having something to do with hatred and bigotry and all that, is just wrong-headed. But it tells you where this country is going. And it's coming out of academia, and it's coming out of cultural Marxist principles, which, French cultural cleansing, political correctness, and all those things. It's just, they can, as far as I'm concerned, they can fold it four ways and put it where the moon don't shine. And I'm going to say what I know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You and I were chief of heritage operations for the SCV, one right after the other. I think you were there 2014 to 2016, and I came in right after you. And I know during that time, it seems like the bottom really fell out. Yeah. I mean, you had the lead up to New Orleans, which was just a travesty. You had Charlottesville occurred, and then the attacks on the monument in Richmond. Later, we got into Memphis, and it came upon us really quickly,
like a tidal wave.
Yeah, I mean, and we were getting hit from all angles. And I know you and I, over those 4-year periods, I mean, we wrote a lot of press releases, and I mean, I was always trying to come across as the voice of reason when I really wanted to bite somebody's head off, But I read an article the other day by a left winger who was attacking the South, but the part of the article that really got me was that he was just incredulous that after all of these years, the statistics and the polls still show that people love the South. They don't hate the South. They don't hate the flag. I mean, even a large percentage of Black Americans say it's just history. And from my perspective and yours, and a lot of us in the SCV, it looks like we're still getting bombarded, but from their perspective, it's like they haven't done enough damage. And, I guess my question to you is, do we survive? Does, where do we go from here? Does our heritage hold up? I mean, what do you think in that term?
Well, yes, I think the answer to that is yes, comma, if we are able to withstand the current incessant and daily cultural attacks on our heritage, which is a very fine heritage. The descendants of the Confederacy, as you know, have fought in every war since, and bravely, and medals of honor and all that. Audie Murphy and Sergeant York and all those guys were just good old boys who are American heroes, fought the Nazis and fought the World War I. So we have to emphasize those things, that we're simply not hateful people. There are at least 75 million people in the United States who have the genes of the Confederacy, who are descendants of the Confederacy, of those who fought. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. We have to withstand and put the lie to this enormous, one thing that's going to change that very quickly. I believe, anyhow, and this is something a little bit different, is this next election. Because there's a reaction. It's not just that they're coming after us, they're coming after everything. And people are sick and tired of this cultural cleansing and political correctness and all this, sexual politics and all that. Just almost want to cover their kids' eyes when the news comes on, this stuff. But I think there's a reaction going on in this country, and I believe that a majority of the people in this country understand exactly what you and I are saying, and they understand exactly why we're saying it, and they feel the same way. And the power of the media left, and that's what's coming after us. This ain't like it's not like the Democratic Party I belong to. We're not talking about Harry Truman and Franklin Roosevelt and those folks. We're not talking about Jimmy Carter. For that matter, we're not talking about Barack Obama. We're talking about a whole new thing that's coming out of very deep-pocketed corporations, and they are taking control from the people. And there has to be a populist uprising, a populist reaction, a counterattack. And we're just getting started. We're not going anywhere. I mean, no, what they're trying to do isn't working. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS, all the big networks, all their trash, all their politics hasn't moved anybody an inch. They encourage each other, and they raise enormous amounts of money, and they attack people, who are just kind of trying to do their patriotic duty or saying what they think. And they've characterized us as, troglodyte, reactionary bigots and racists and all that stuff. Nothing be further from the truth. But people see that. People recognize that the truth when they hear it. They recognize people who are speaking from their heart. And they're sick and tired of it too. They don't like to send their schools to, where there's teachers wanting them, telling them how to change what sex they are or what gender they are. They don't want to hear that from a school teacher. That's personal, private, family business there. And should not be a political movement. And as far as all this cultural cleansing, I mean, so they named Lord Fairfax. So without Lord Fairfax, there wouldn't have been a George Washington. Without George Washington, there wouldn't be a United States. We wouldn't even be. We'd have a. What's that noise? I guess it may. So one of your dogs growling at you.
There's probably a rabbit in the yard.
I don't know about you, but I'm hearing. Anyhow, I guess that's all the viewers saying, "Shut up, Jones." I get this. We can win this thing simply by continuing to be ourselves, saying what we think, representing and standing up for, recognizing the sins of the past. I mean, we all have to do that. We've made progress in this country, and the South. I mean, black people are moving to the South from New Jersey and Minnesota and Chicago because they hear it's better here. It's not as dangerous, that it's more fun, that people get along better. So no, I think we're winning, and that's why they're so upset. It's just it's terrible what's going on. When they can pull down statues like that. That thing that happened in Charlottesville was a total ruse. People just out there saying, no, the statue, very simple thing. This is a man, generally he was a complex man, but he was a good man and a Christian man. He was of his time, and we honor him as we honor our ancestors who are on that side of history. But they wouldn't hear that. They claimed that it was a bunch of, then all these other, a bunch of Yankee nuts showed up and started a riot with each other, while the people like us who were out there, just sons of Confederate veterans, people, we were just doing a very peaceful, friendly discussion. So it got completely overwhelmed, and that happens. Same thing, it's same thing happened in Louisiana and New Orleans. Well, we can sit down and talk to our worst enemies face to face across a table and break bread and listen to them just as they will listen to us. And that's what we need to do. We don't need to change anything. We need to understand that our ancestry, our traditions, our culture, all of that is being seriously threatened. But we've been through worse. I mean, we went through the war between the states. We've been through famines in the South and floods, all these terrible things. But we're survivors, and we're going to survive this. And nobody that I know is going to be ashamed of their ancestors. It's American history, and so I don't know. I don't know anybody that's backed up an inch. And I can tell you this: this past weekend we had, 20,000 people over our store for this big cruise in. And it was General Lee's from all over the country who go out and get together and parade around, and they went around the racetrack over there, and they showed up, and we had a lot of people from overseas come, and here on top of every one of those cars is the rebel flag. And I ain't taking mine down out in front. And we had people there with black and white and red and green and yellow, and nobody cared. They were having a great time. We were celebrating the best in America, where we can accept our past and get beyond our past and our differences and break bread as basically as the human family. I believe in that. I've seen it happen. See it happen all the time. I mean, it's a very simple thing. And Dr. King said it, he, in a very good way. He said, I have a dream that someday on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will dine together at the table of brotherhood. Well, we've reached that day. We do that here. We do that all over. We're not at war with each other. We respect each other. And I think the Dukes of Hazzard really promoted that thing. I think the Sons of Confederate Veterans stand for that too. We're not bigots. We're not hateful people. But because of the power of the media, they have gotten to define us. And we have to hold the line. We cannot let them define us. We know who we are. We're good-hearted people, and we're not bigoted people. And we're not going to turn our back on our ancestors either. Who would do that? I had ancestors who lived in slavery who were black. I had ancestors who, died fighting for the South. I have ancestors. Well, we learn from all of those things, and so I think the Sons of Confederate Veterans is one of the finest organizations, veterans organizations, because it's I belong to my people fought in all wars, I guess, but that we can be proud of our ancestors who fought in the 1918 and in 1945 and in 1776, 1812. All of those conflicts, Southerners have stood up and been the first to enlist. And I'm not going to let anybody define me by my ancestry, by the fact that I'm just very, very proud to be a descendant of the Confederacy, to be a son of the South, and to have been a part of seeing the South go from Jim Crow and white only, and you go to the back of the bus and you can't eat in this place or go in that restroom. That was just wrong. And I've seen the South go from that to being the Sun Belt, to leading the nation in racial progress. Now I think that people want to tear that down, and I think they're just professional race haters of all colors. And I think that, that some people, certain people are just, that's how they make their living. They divide people. You're white, we're black. You did this, you owe us this, you owe us that, and all that stuff. Al Sharpton's a perfect example. Jesse Jackson's done a lot of that too. He should know better. But, the only way I know of to communicate at all is just to treat everybody the same. That's what Uncle Jesse taught, to treat everybody the same. Greet them as a neighbor, and until they give you reason otherwise, do right by them. Just look them in the eye and tell them the truth. And, I've seen that in my life. And we have people come to our store because of the Dukes of Hazzard, which is a Southern show, flew that flag proudly. There was no racism in Hazzard County. It was a happy place where everybody looked out for one another. And people come from all over the world to our little store and say, we love this show. I've had people come from Italy. Come walking down the road from Italy. I do these Zoom calls like this. I did one with a guy from Italy a couple of weeks ago. He was a policeman in Rome at the Vatican. And he grew up with the Dukes of Hazzard. And he was so happy to do what you and I are doing. He was crying. It was like, so we made people happy all over the world. And there was no racism in Hazzard County. And there was no hatred, nothing like that. Never even a whisper of anything like that. Because of Uncle Jesse's moral authority. Came right from the Old Testament and the New Testament. Treat everybody the same. And I think we have to teach our children that. But because there are forces that want to divide us and are working very hard at that every day, we have to stand up to them, and we have to make our position absolutely clear. We're not hateful people. We're not bigots. And we're certainly not ashamed of the actions of our ancestors. Or the Christian cross of St. Andrew, which we proudly display.
Yeah, and I think we have to, and most importantly, or certainly equally as important, is pass that view down to our kids. And maybe that's best done by our own example. A lot of youngsters. I know I'm seeing more and more young people come into the SCV. A lot of them probably are watching this right now, and that's a great thing. But hey, Moose, if you can hear me, do we have any questions from any of the audience out there for Ben? Where you at, buddy?
There he is.
We getting any questions that anybody would like to ask?
Someone asked one a while ago. Let me see if I can find it. Christian Lee asked, "Did you do any jump stunts?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, I jumped a Rolls Royce one time accidentally, but I was in a few, and I did a lot of the driving. But when you saw the long jumps, across a river or between two mountains or something, that was professional stunt drivers, and we had the best in the business. And some of those guys set world land-to-land films just in the course of filming the show. And we still do that. We get together and jump a car, tear up cars every now and then. We did one in Nashville at the fairgrounds. We had this huge Dukes Fest there. And Alma, who was it that jumped that car? Yeah, it was Corey Eubanks, who's one of the great stunt drivers in Hollywood. His father was Bob Eubanks, the game show guy, and he grew up right next to where we filmed. When he was a kid, he'd sneak into the lot at night and hotwire the generals and drive them around. Well, he was a stunt driver and he worked on our show. He jumped a car, a General Lee, a ramp to ground. He hit the ramp, flew through the air, and I think it was 247 feet, most of a football field. And that's a big car. And we did that live. And Corey, I think, was about 3 or 4 inches shorter when he got out of the car, but we stretched him back out. So we still get together and wreck a car every now and then just for the fun of it.
Any other questions?
We got one from our Chief of Heritage Operations, Mr. Ron Kennedy, asking, did you ever have to help Hollywood folks understand Southern talk?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I would. In fact, I had to, those Hollywood writers, they try to do this Southern dialect, and they were nice old guys, but, from New York or Hollywood, and they're out there, and they'd never even been to the South. So I said, well, I think people picked up on what me and Sonny Schroyer were doing. Sonny's from Valdosta, Georgia. And Jimmy Best he was from Kentucky. So we had the real thing going, And I would Cooterize. I'd take the script and say, what in the world? Nobody'd ever say that. So I'd just rewrite it in Southern dialect. I remember one time said, and we'd use these sayings you'd hear. And I'd heard this saying, faster than a minnow will swim a nickel dipper. A little nickel dipper. So I said, I'll be there faster than a minnow will swim a nickel dipper. And everybody said, what did he say? What did he say? So we did a lot of things like that. And they had, I wrote this CB thing, and it would say, breaker one. Does anyone have their ears on the Hazzard net? Come on. Crazy Cooter. Coming at you, something. So I said, let me play with this a little bit. I said, breaker one, might be crazy, but I ain't dumb. Crazy Scooter coming at you. Any all do boys home in the Hazzard net, come on. And we got doing things like that. And the writers just said, let them take care of it. They were nice guys, but I don't think the only time they'd ever been in the South was in boot camp at Paris Island or something. And they wanted to forget about it. They were not Southern guys, but, we had so much fun doing that, and I hope we represented the culture well. I mean, they were good. The good guys always, like those old westerns, like we were talking about before. The good guys always won. Nobody ever really got hurt. Nobody even bled, and always had a happy ending. And it was a family that hung together and looked out for each other, even though they did not have much. They put family first and doing the right thing first. And I think that's just like those Gene Autry and Roy Rogers things we were talking about. You can't beat that. That's a good message. Not sophisticated maybe for some people, but it was a whole lot of fun doing it. And our show, unlike every other show that was on then, is still going strong all over the world. And we're very, very proud that our flag, the St. Andrew's Cross, the Confederate battle flag, which my ancestors fought under, is on top of that car. It's a great piece of American history. And I'm always saying we need to come together and have fun, just like we did in Hazzard County. No hatred. There was never even a scintilla of racism on that show. And that's the way the world ought to be.
Any others, Moose?
We got a couple more here. We got one from Mr. Jeffrey asking, are you a lifetime member of the SCV?
Yes. Yeah, I have been for quite a while. And on behalf of several people, one I mentioned earlier, maybe when I was talking on the phone about Gabriel Jacobs, who was killed at Fraser's Farm. He was a descendant of Gabriel Jacobs. I'm after 4 or 5 generations, his namesake, had been a slave in Jamestown. Gabriel Jacobs and his brother, and Harley Jenrette, married my great-great-grandma, who was a Jacobs. Annie Jean Jacobs married Harley Jeanette, who fought for the South, and there are others. But all those folks came out of Columbus County, North Carolina, down near the South Carolina line, where my mama was from. And they were just the salt of the earth people. And, yeah, so the answer to that is, yeah, I had people on both sides of the family who fought. And the Sons of Confederate Veterans is one of the greatest, it's the most wonderful organization because, we understand it. We are Southerners and we understand it. We are descended from them. And I believe that they did absolutely the right thing in their time and place. They went out and they were fighting for Columbus County, North Carolina, or Rappahannock County, Virginia, where I am now. They were patriotic Americans, and they could not control those events beyond them. Those great political events that caused the rift in the American fabric, the tear in the American fabric. And nobody more than Southerners worked to put this thing back together. Nobody more than Southerners have represented their country at a higher percentage than anybody else. And we talked about this earlier and all these other wars. They were just fine men who, they didn't have a lot of them. None of them had any money. They were poor folks for the most part. But they understood, here comes an army and they're going to burn us out. So they went to fight. And they fought more valiantly, and I think military historians will tell you this, that it was one of the most extraordinary militaries. They were undermanned, they were under-equipped, but their courage and their valor and their love of each other and of their region, of the South, was what kept them in the field against overwhelming odds, year after year after year, until they had nothing left. And they were, some of them, when General Lee said, we got to put Ukraine down, they said, no, let's keep on fighting. The best generation of fighting men this country's ever produced, probably. So, yeah, I'm proud of them.
Any other questions there, Moose? We got a few minutes.
Oh, no, we can go as long as y'all want to. That's up to y'all. See here, we got a statement from one of our sponsors, Southern Flags and Quilts. They said they would be honored to make you a custom flag your treat.
Oh, wow. Well, you give me that number, and we will be in touch with them. And I would be honored to have something like that. We will display it in our store. I have to remind people. They'll come in. You got that red flag? You got that? And if I hear that, I say, "Wait a minute now. Have you ever seen the flag of Great Britain, or have you ever seen the great paintings of St. Andrew's crucifixion that the great masters painted? That's a Christian cross, and that's the foremost meaning of that symbol. And I think and if they don't like that symbol, they need to read their history, and they need to understand why that symbol was chosen. And it has a much higher meaning. And so
a lot of people would be surprised to know that it's on the Jamaican flag also.
Yeah, it's on flags all over the world. It's a common thing. Yeah, Scotland's the best known probably. And a lot of the Scots Irish tradition was in the South and fought on the side of the South. Anyhow,
any others?
That's why I'm looking forward to that quilt. I'm gonna get in touch. I'll get in touch with those. I might sleep under that quilt. I don't know if I'll put it up in the store or not.
We'll definitely get the number to you. They're great supporters of the chat of this show, and we've been doing it. I say we, not me. I've just been doing it, guest hosting for a couple months now. But Moose and Connor have been doing this. This is the third year.
Yes.
I think. Fourth year. And the reach has just been great. I mean, I don't know how many
Well,
viewers.
Moose looks like he's got another 40 or 50 years he can do this.
That's what we hope.
Yeah, we'll
That's
do
what
it.
I hope.
We'll do it. You know, it's a gene. I think it's in our genes. You know, we'll pass those genes on. We'll this organization.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, this organization. We're just starting out. You know, the Sons of Confederate Veterans are going to be around as long as there's a descendant, and each generation brings more descendants. You know. And there's a lot of it, but what was about it? One in every 4 Americans is descended from the Confederacy. There's 70, 80 million descendants, and each generation there's that many more. It's exponential, right. And so all we're trying to teach to them is that they have a heritage that they can be extraordinarily proud of, and they have to understand it in its time as real history. If you understand, if you go back and you study, you see how all those things in American history led up to that and how everything since then has been affected by it. But they've gone further. Our opponents have gone further than just coming after, you know, us and the Confederate flags and Robert E. Lee. They want to see George Washington gone. They want to see Theodore Roosevelt. They were tearing down Theodore Roosevelt statues in New York during all those riots. They want to see Jefferson gone, who created the Declaration of Independence. They want to see James Madison gone, the Virginian who was the father of the Constitution. They want to see George Washington gone off of every public building that there is and all those statues. The father of our country, without whom there certainly would be no United States of America. So they don't know that. We have to teach them our history, our common history.
Got any other questions, Moose?
We got a couple. Got a question and a statement, all from the same person. Victor Smith from Florida said he'd be honored to make you a custom tumbler.
Well, I'd be honored to get it. You know, that stuff, all these folks, we've got 3 Cooters outlets. I'll do the commercial here. Cooters is a celebration of the Dukes of Hazzard, and people love it for all over the world. And we show the show. The folks who still were on the show this past weekend, Tom Wopat was with us, Luke Duke, and Dorothy Best, who was James West's widow, came and joined us. She was on the show. Wade Jennings is with us a lot, who was Waylon's grandson, sounds just like him. Daisy Duke comes to our stores all the time, and Rick Hurst, who played Cletus the deputy, and Sonny Schwartz down there in Valdosta, Georgia. He comes with all the family, and the family extends to everybody that ever watched the show. And it's a wonderful, happy, there's no downside to it. It's just we make music, we wreck cars, we just have a ball with each other. So we do festivals and things like that. So check out cootersplace.com. And we've got a store in Pigeon Forge and a store in Nashville right by the Grand Ole Opry. And we got a store here in the Shenandoah Valley in Luray, Virginia, where the great Luray Caverns are. And I can look out, if it wasn't dark, I could look out the window and look right up at the top of the Blue Ridge Mountains and see the Appalachian Trail and the Skyline Drive. I think it was one of the first scenic highways in America. It's a great place to visit. And there's no doubt, you know, you won't find any hateful people at the Duke's place and at Cooter's. It ain't about that. In fact, it's about the opposite of that. It's about, just like Uncle said, I think we were the last show on television where somebody, would say grace and read from the Bible. You children do right. So, it's a wonderful show. And people all over the world have enjoyed it. It's been shown in 8 or 10 different languages. And I've run into people all over the world who Dukes of Hazzard, and just get happy. They're just happy to think about it. It's a fine thing. And I've also wanted to say this about the Sons of Confederate Veterans. We've got our priorities right. If you don't, it's caused us to study American history more than most people do, to understand the context of the war between the states, and to understand what went before it, and what inevitably led to it, and the mistakes that were made, but no army ever fought more valiantly, did more with so little, resources against overwhelming odds, and so we're proud of them, if not for the cause, for the effort. And I'm so proud to have their genes and proud of them and of my ancestors. And I don't see how anybody could have a problem with that. I don't have any problem with the descendants of the Union Army. I honor them, and I honored the sacrifice that their ancestors made. But they got to cut us some slack, if you know what I mean. We're good people.
Any other questions? We're about 10 after now. Y'all want to wrap it up? I just said it's after 9 o'clock where Ben is. You and Moose and I are on Central Time. Ben's an hour ahead.
Yeah. I just, I'm so proud. I know that maybe some people are watching who are not descendants, or who are descendants who are thinking about joining the Sons of Confederate. Dude, just do it. It's a great organization, and it's something to be very, very proud of. And you're needed. We need you to speak up every day, to be proud of those ancestors and understand the sacrifice that they made in the time that they made it. In the annals of warfare, there's never been a greater effort under worse circumstances. And so I'm very proud of them. They did what they thought was right. And a lot of people who do study history understand that thing became inevitable, and that it could have been avoided and should have been avoided, and that that didn't happen. But that's okay. We're here now, all these years later. The Sons of Confederate Veterans, I hope, and I believe in the afterlife, and I believe that my ancestors are saying, y'all, thank you. Y'all keep on doing what you're doing. Keep saying what you think. Keep standing up and talking back, and try to build bridges, and try to, spread light where there's only darkness about these issues. And I'm happy too that the Dukes of Hazzard has contributed to that in some ways. Still flies that flag proudly all over the world in a positive way, and represents, I think, the Southern culture, even though there's all that Hollywood stuff in it. It represents the Southern culture is something that is very positive and worthwhile, and good people living simple, honest lives and getting their priorities right. It's about family, and it's about home, and it's about the church, and it's about law and order, all those things, all those good, positive things. And I'm proud to have been a part of that too. So anyhow, I always ended the show this way, or ended my part. I was saying, breaker one. Might be crazy, but I ain't done crazy, Cooter, coming at you. I'm down and I'm gone, y'all.
Hey Ben, I can't tell you how thankful we are. Everybody out there, we love you. We love the show. And I really, all of us, speaking on behalf of all of us, of all the people watching, and Moose and Connor as well, we just really appreciate you being on and doing this for us. And hopefully we'll have you back sometime soon. And yeah. I got one request. The next time you're going to be at your show, your store in Nashville, let me know, because I only live about 2 hours from there. I'd love to come up and see you again. So,
well, I will let you know. My travel, has been kind of restricted. I've had a series of, I've got more metal in my body than the General Lee's got. I mean, I'd start naming my operations, and it would take us another hour. But I just turned 81. I slowed down, but I'm planning to get back down there and to Pigeon Forge once or twice, and as my health improves, and certainly get to Nashville. It's a great location. It's right there, and right across from the Grand Ole Opry. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty good location.
Yeah. Well, good deal, buddy. Well, hey, thanks again. I can't thank you enough. Great to see you. And thank Miss Alma for helping you get situated.
I've got this real good deal. Miss Alma does all the work, and I get all the credit. It ain't fair. It ain't fair. But without her, none of this would have happened.
Can't beat
She's
that.
the one. He's the one that keeps the Dukes of Hazzard and Cooter's place on the map. We're on the radar screen, and we're doing great. Everybody in Hazzard County is fine, and we appreciate the support of everybody out there all over the world, really. So thanks y'all. Thank you. And was it Moose back there behind you there, Connor? Tell Moose hey too. It'd be a good name in Hazzard County. Thanks y'all. Take care.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody Monday night.
Thank everybody for tuning in for our 100th episode here at SCV Chat. Please remember to share this episode and make sure you tune in Thursday for the Confederate Legion update, Thursday at 7 o'clock Confederate Standard Time on Look Around the Confederation. Both Kennedy twins will be on, so I have a light work on Thursday. And make sure to tune in Wednesday. We might be trying to have another special episode as well as a rewatch and rerun of this episode. Again, thank you all for tuning in for this 100th episode. And remember, chat heads, no Fumar in the elevator. Good night, everybody.